It's obvious that we disagree about morality and politics. People are polarized about what's right and what's wrong. But less obvious is why we disagree. Some argue that people with different politics have deeply different minds. But this idea is wrong. We all have the same moral mind, and it revolves around harm. I'm a social psychologist at the University of North Carolina, and I study how morality works. My research shows that no matter our politics or culture, our moral sense is all the same. Everyone cares about preventing harm. We get outraged when someone victimizes the vulnerable, which is why no one thinks it's okay to kick a puppy. But although we all agree that it's wrong to inflict harm, moral disagreement happens when one person's perpetrator is another person's victim. In fact, almost every hot-button moral debate is driven by a disagreement about who is doing the harm and who is being harmed, including things like abortion and policing. People's position on illegal immigration, for example, is driven by whether they see those at the borders as victims of violence or as causing it. Now, once you understand that everyone's trying to protect themselves from harm, you can better understand those with different moral positions. And this leads to less feelings of outrage and more civil conversations. But it can be hard to remember that folks on the other side are just trying to protect themselves when they so often seem like predators bent on destruction. But this misconception is grounded in a myth about human nature, the idea that we evolved more as predators than as prey. Our minds evolved over the course of millions of years, right? Before we had modern civilization, before we were even Homo sapiens. The roots of our psychology are found in our hominid ancestors, who early scientists labeled killer apes, thinking they spent their days hunting, stalking, killing. But these early scientists had it wrong. They overlooked evidence that the teeth of our ancestors were more for chewing fruits and nuts than for tearing meat. And the skeletons of our ancestors were frequently found butchered and devoured in the nests of big birds or in the dens of big cats, often with fang-sized holes in their skull. Of course, today, we are apex predators. We have guns, and we can use them to shoot wolves from helicopters. But in our bodies and our minds, we are still more prey than predator. Look at the average lion. It's a killing machine. Look at the average human being. Look at the claws of a bear, then look at your fingernails. We are not natural-born predators. And this legacy of being hunted for millions of years is why it's so easy for us to feel threatened, even if we're in a completely innocuous situation, like opening up social media. And we feel especially threatened when it comes to morality, where we worry about being victimized by someone evil. And that's because morality evolved to protect us from other people. See, in the past, to better avoid the threat of predators, we moved into groups. But once we lived in tribes, there was another threat. Your neighbor. Other people you lived with could hurt you or kill you. And so we needed a psychological tool to condemn those who might harm us, to get outraged at those who might victimize the vulnerable. And that psychological tool is our moral sense. Today, we still have the same moral sense that our Stone Age ancestors had. It's still focused on the threat of victimization. And this is why parents today get terrified that their kids are going to be abducted when they play outside, even though statistics show we're objectively safer than ever. But although we all agree that it's important to protect the vulnerable from victimization, different people make different assumptions about who or what is especially vulnerable to harm. How vulnerable is a cop or a coral reef to mistreatment? Well, it depends on the politics of the person you ask. Our lab has asked thousands of people to rate the vulnerability of many different targets, focusing on 4 broad clusters. One, the environment, like coral reefs and the rainforest. The othered, people outside the center of society, like undocumented immigrants and trans people. The powerful, like corporate leaders and state troopers. And the divine, including Jesus and the Bible. Now, what were people's perceptions? It turns out most people have the same ranking, seeing the environment and the othered as most vulnerable to harm, and then followed by the powerful and then the divine. But there are some really big differences across politics. So more progressive folks amplify differences in vulnerability, seeing the environment and the othered as especially vulnerable to harm, and the powerful and the divine as especially invulnerable to harm. On the other hand, more conservative people dampen differences in vulnerability, seeing members of these four groups as relatively equal in terms of their vulnerability. This graph explains political differences today, with liberals dividing the world into two groups of the vulnerable oppressed and the invulnerable oppressors. On the other hand, conservatives focus less on group differences and more focus on how everyone can be harmed. These differences also explain why liberals are more likely to support Black Lives Matter, which emphasizes the relative vulnerability of Black people over the police. On the other hand, conservatives' tendency to dampen differences explains why they're more likely to support All Lives Matter, which focuses on how anyone can be victimized. So we've seen so far how our moral minds and our political disagreements focus on perceptions of harm, but how can we use these insights to bridge divides? Well, if you remember, one big problem when it comes to politics is that we see folks on the other side more as predators than as fellow vulnerable human beings. And so the way to better overcome these divides is to showcase our personal vulnerability. And the way to do that is by telling personal stories of harm. Dozens of studies from our lab show that telling personal stories of harm bridge divides better than using facts in conversations, which many people think are the cornerstone to more civil dialogue. Think about it. Imagine you're having a conversation, a disagreement with someone about abortion or immigration. In one version of this conversation, you're throwing stats and facts at each other. In another version, you're opening up about a personal experience in which you've suffered. I think we can all agree that the second conversation feels more civil, and the data back this up. One study from my lab, we had people disagree about gun control. And in one version, the conversation focused on personal experiences, like how a family member was hurt by a stray bullet, or a loved one used a gun to defend themselves. Or the conversation focused on impartial statistics, like the annual number of firearm deaths in the country, or the annual number of times people use guns in self-defense. As we predicted, the data show that the conversation that focused on personal experiences created more empathy and fostered more respect across disagreement. Now, one reason this happened is because in today's era of fake facts, personal stories seem truer than facts. I'm not saying that facts, of course, aren't important. I'm a scientist, and facts are crucial to doing good science and for making good political policy. But they're not the best way to start a contentious conversation. If you think again of how we evolved, it was telling stories to each other around a campfire, not throwing stats at each other. Another power of stories is that when they focus on harm, it makes us seem more rational. Even if you don't agree with someone's moral beliefs, we can all understand the motivation to protect ourselves and our families. Stories of harm also work to bridge divides in real life. Our lab partners with a nonprofit called Narrative 4, and they use storytelling to build empathy in the real world. For example, between a man who runs a big gun sales website and a woman who lost her daughter to a mass shooter. Even beyond the gun debate, stories of harm help to foster respect when it comes to abortion, immigration, the environment, taxes, whether those conversations happen in person, on social media, on Fox News, or in CNN. We can all understand how someone might want to protect themselves. Now, of course, Not everyone has a personal story of harm when it comes to every moral issue, but we can all leverage our harm-based mind to have better conversations. I'll give you 3 science-backed tips. 1, connect. Before you talk about politics, connect with someone as another human being. This means volunteering your own everyday fears and worries and asking about other people's. 2, once you connect with someone, you'll want to invite them to share their beliefs. The key word is invite. You're not forcing anyone to share, you're encouraging them. It's important to make sure that they know your motivation is to understand them and not win some debate. That will make them feel more comfortable with opening up with the threats and feelings of worry that underlie their moral position. 3rd, once someone shares their moral beliefs, you'll need to validate those feelings. This doesn't mean giving up your moral convictions. It doesn't mean changing your mind. It does mean acknowledging that people's moral beliefs are grounded in a genuine feeling of threat, in genuine worries, right? It means acknowledging the authenticity of their beliefs. Together, these 3 tips, connect, invite, validate, CIV, spell the beginning, the sieve of more civil conversations. Now, even with these tips, it's hard to talk about politics. But hopefully, once we recognize that people on the other side don't have a fundamentally different moral mind, it becomes easier. At the end of the day, we all care about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and society from suffering. Remembering this crucial fact will allow us to have more understanding, feel less outrage, have better conversations, and hopefully, eventually, allow us to come back together. Thank you.